Yeah.
How's it
I think, well, the city as an architectural thing that we all inhabit. I mean, people talk about ecological footprint in the city. The cities are very efficient because, you can get all these people on the, whatever, but the footprint is expanding well beyond the city, as everybody knows. The food is coming from far outside the city. The city itself is terribly inefficient spatially. Most of the buildings are empty, something like 70% of the time. When you take away 9 to 5, I'm in an office building. All the other time, nobody's there. Often the lights are on, it's heated, it's air conditioned, whatever, but nobody's there. Take away the weekends, nobody's there. Take away all the people that, time people are taking sick or on holiday, nobody's there. So most of the time, nobody's in these buildings that are downtown. And when they are, they're at home or at the office, but they're never in two places at once. So you need to have kind of this more happening where people are using the space 100% of the time for it to be efficient. The way the buildings are constructed, they use a phenomenal amount of energy for heating and cooling, predominantly for cooling, because there's so much heat gain with all the glass. That's absolutely unsustainable. Like, even with all the most elaborate lake water cooling strategies you can imagine, it's just not going to work well in the future. It's a very long and difficult question. I think Buckminster Fuller summed it up pretty well with the idea of energy slaves, where we have, energy has become so cheap, and it does a lot of work for us. And if you were to convert the relationship between the amount of energy that each of us use in the city and in this kind of way of living, if you were to compare that energy to the amount of human energy it would have taken in the form of slaves working for us, each one of us would have at our disposal something like 400 slaves. Now, this was 1960 some odd when Fuller first calculated this. I would guess it's probably double or triple that by now. Like, my guess is I'd probably got 1,000 energy slaves working for me, doing all this kind of work for me. That's absolutely not sustainable. And a lot of these slaves you can draw a direct little thread all the way to China to some 50 people that are producing the garbage that I'm buying. And the second set of sockets that I bought from Walmart, right? Like, all that kind of stuff. It's a phenomenal amount of energy and people that we can just leverage because we're rich. And that's we're very selfish. We've become very selfish, and so we don't share. We don't share space. We don't share stuff. We don't share tools. We don't share food. We don't share anything, and we don't want to. There's a certain pride in having everything to myself, and I think it's a warped kind of pride. I have my own space. My car's paid for. I'm kind of got out my shit together. And I don't care if you do or not, but everybody's in this game where they need to kind of look after themselves and their immediate, their own family, and to hell with anything else. And what you have is all these people that are islands, working as islands, and in a pretty disconnected way. They don't need to share resources yet, I think. That'll have to happen again in the future because there won't be enough to go around. This is a ridiculously wealthy culture. And so for us to even have this mentality it's like a cancer, I think. And that'll get broken down and chipped apart as we realize we don't have as many resources as we tend to think we do. We need to kind of share more and not have so much duplication of effort to get the same result. There's a guy named Torvald Fagra who wrote a book on tents. And he had something very interesting to say about the yurt, or Mongolian gur, like the felted yurt. And his description was basically, this thing has endured just as long as the pyramids. It's a form that keeps appearing and reappearing and reappearing. It's like perennial architecture. So what's greater, the pyramids or the yurt? It's a form of human habitation that basically is fully involved in the ecological process. You have basically goats that you're herding, that you take their fur from, and you make felt, and you felt the yurt, and then once the yurt, felt gets a little worn, it becomes the carpet, the flooring, and then it tramps back right into the earth and turns into grass, and the goats eat the grass, and you have this complete cycle, this complete process. Pyramids are this monumental thing built for who knows what reason, and sure, it's one form of great architecture, but the yurts are still active. It's still an active life process. I think great architecture is something that connects our scale with the scale of everything smaller than us to everything that's much bigger than us. You've got bugs and bacteria and all kinds of little tiny things, and then you've got planets and galaxies. We're of a certain size, and we have a certain kind of physiology and a way that we take in food and excrete waste. And how can we be in something that can speak to that and to help connect us to the larger world and the smaller world? And I think when you had something like a yurt, you have an organic process. It's all part of what you do. You have a whole cosmology that's embedded in that. And we've become so disconnected because the infrastructure that ties into architecture now is of a scale that's way bigger than anything we can see. It goes on and on. You've got pipes and gas lines and electricity plants and everything. Nobody can comprehend that thing. And so our placelessness, I think, is a product of actually being disconnected from knowing what's actually going on. So great architecture, in my opinion, is something that actually connects you as a human being on a spiritual level, on whatever level you care to examine it at, physiological, microscopic, to the world and to what's larger than the world. It's very hard to imagine what a long-term future is going to be like for architecture, what the long-term holds. We can look to 2,000 years ago, but the game is completely different. All the rules have changed. The resources are different. It's impossible to know how we're going to be living on this planet, if at all, in 100 years, 200 years, or 300 years. Where I'm coming from is living in tents, living very minimally in tents and sleeping bags and with like camping gear, like full time for a year or 2 years at a time. And that's what informed what went into this project. This thing is designed as kind of like its training wheels for a new way of living. It's to basically wean people out of condominiums and big houses and city scale infrastructure to get down to the level of tent, where I can basically survive by my wits, grow and collect what I need to eat, and kind of move as I need to. And I think that is probably going to be the short to medium term solution that a lot of us are probably going to find ourselves in. You look at what happens in regions that are in crisis right now. You have refugee camps. That's how people are living, unfortunately, en masse. And I think for us to be smart about it, we need to kind of form collective groups, know how to build tents, how to have portable shelter, how to be able to move around. I mean, I'm not kind of doom and glooming here, but we need to think beyond this, the city as a form of dwelling. Yeah. Well, I think that you got to take it down to this very basic level. Like, if you imagine yourself, you've got an acre, and you've got a tent, and a sleeping bag, and some stuff for cooking. What do you need to live? What stuff do you put in you? What comes out of you, and how do you deal with it? You have to reduce it to a pretty basic formula. Instead of saying, oh, I need 2 kilowatts of electricity to run my plasma screen TV and this and that. Well, forget all that. What do you really need? So you need energy for your food, for water. You need water to water your plants that you're going to grow to eat. And once you start connecting those dots, then you kind of figure out what's the basic system. And then you can say, well, how can I be smart about this? So I'm not going to be shitting in this area over here that's going to be going to my water that goes into my garden. So you build a little composting toilet or a bucket for dealing with that. So the infrastructure becomes something that you are related to, and that you know what the consequences of it are and how to deal with it on a very local level. So composting toilets, rainwater collection, grey water recycling. How are you going to cook? Do you need cooking fuel? Is it going to be propane? Is it going to be, what kind of fuel is going to be available? Is it going to be wood? Are you going to hack down your forest so you can have cooking fuel? So these are all things that you have to kind of think through and be pretty nimble and flexible about, because it's very difficult to say there's one way that it'll work for everybody for all time. It's always going to change.